My sister and her wealthy fiancé dumped his 10-year-old daughter in my living room with a cheap duffel bag and a flight to catch. Before walking out the door, my sister smirked and told me not to get too attached because the girl would not be her responsibility anymore when they got back. The second the lock clicked shut, the little girl unzipped her backpack and whispered that she had a secret to tell me. What she pulled out of that bag made my blood run cold. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect someone from your own toxic family. I am Maya, 33 years old, and somehow still managing the collateral damage my family creates. I work as a forensic accountant, running my own firm, right here in Atlanta. For as long as I can remember my parents, DeAndre and Valerie treated me like an inconvenient shadow cast by my younger sister Chloe. She was the golden child. I was the scapegoat. I survived by building an impenetrable fortress around myself using my numbers, my business, and my unyielding independence. I did not rely on anyone, and I certainly did not expect my family to bring anything but chaos into my sanctuary. That chaos arrived uninvited on a rainy Friday evening. I was sitting at my kitchen island reviewing audit reports when the front door of my townhouse swung open. Chloe had a spare key for emergencies, but she treated it like an all-access pass to my life. She marched into my living room wearing a pristine cream-colored trench coat and oversized designer sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Her heels clicked sharply against my hardwood floors, demanding immediate attention. Right behind her was Connor. He was 38 years old, white, and exuded the kind of aggressive corporate arrogance that usually required a corner office and a golf club membership. Today, however, his usual polished veneer was cracking. He was sweating visibly, and his fingers kept tapping nervously against the face of his heavy gold Rolex. Trailing behind them like a forgotten afterthought was Lily. She was Connor's 10-year-old daughter from his previous marriage to a wealthy family, the kind of old money that looked down on people like him. Lily stood frozen on my welcome mat. She was wearing a faded, oversized sweater that swallowed her small frame, and she clutched a worn-out backpack tight to her chest. Chloe did not bother with a greeting. She dropped a cheap fraying duffel bag onto my pristine rug. It hit the floor with a hollow thud that sounded entirely too light for a week-long trip. "Here she is," Chloe announced, gesturing vaguely toward the terrified child. "We have a flight to Paris in 3 hours, and the traffic on the connector is going to be an absolute nightmare." I stood up slowly, closing my laptop. I looked at the cheap duffel bag, then at Lily's pale face, and finally at my sister. "You told me you were dropping her off tomorrow morning," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "You also said you were bringing her proper luggage and her asthma medication." Chloe rolled her eyes and let out an exasperated sigh. She pulled off her sunglasses and glared at me. "Plans change, Maya. Connor scored us a sudden upgrade on an earlier flight, and we simply could not pass it up. The medication is in her backpack somewhere. Just deal with it. You are always so obsessed with the schedule." I looked at Connor, expecting him to intervene on behalf of his own child. He avoided my gaze completely. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, staring intently at his phone screen. "We really need to go, Chloe," he muttered, his voice tight with an urgency that felt entirely disproportionate to catching a flight. "The car service is waiting outside." Chloe turned to the mirror hanging in my entryway and began adjusting her hair. I watched her reflection, trying to suppress the familiar resentment boiling in my chest. She was perfectly manicured, perfectly styled, and completely devoid of basic human empathy. I stepped closer to Lily, offering her a soft smile, but the little girl flinched and looked down at her sneakers. I turned my attention back to my sister. "You cannot just dump a child here without her necessities, Chloe. I do not even see a winter coat for her. It is supposed to drop below freezing this weekend." Chloe spun around, her eyes flashing with that familiar malicious spark. Her voice dropped, losing all pretense of civility. "Do not lecture me, Maya. You are doing us a favor for 1 week. Besides," she smirked, crossing her arms over her expensive coat, "do not get too attached to her. When Connor and I get back from Europe, she will not be my responsibility anymore. We are sending her to boarding school. I am not about to start my new marriage playing babysitter to someone else's baggage." The cruelty in her words hung heavily in the air. Lily shrank back into the wall, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her backpack straps. "You are unbelievable," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "She is standing right there, Chloe. How can you speak about a child like that?" Chloe let out a sharp, patronizing laugh. It was the same laugh our mother used whenever I tried to assert a boundary. "Oh, please, Maya, do not try to take the moral high ground with me. You are just bitter because you are 33 and single, sitting alone in this sterile townhouse with nothing but your spreadsheets to keep you warm. You are jealous that I am marrying a successful man and flying off to Paris while you have absolutely nobody. You should be thanking me for giving you a little taste of motherhood, since we both know it is never going to happen for you." The gaslighting was textbook. She hit every insecurity our parents had spent years cultivating. In the past, a comment like that would have crushed me. It would have sent me spiraling into self-doubt and defensive arguments. But today, I just felt a cold, calculating calm wash over me. My forensic mind cataloged the scene. Connor's unnatural panic, the cheap duffel bag, the sudden rush to the airport, the blatant disregard for the child. None of the variables added up. "Just take the girl and keep her quiet," Chloe snapped, turning back toward the door. "We will be back next Sunday. Do not call us unless somebody is dying. International roaming charges are ridiculous, and Connor needs to disconnect from work." Connor practically bolted out the front door before she even finished her sentence. Chloe followed him, her designer heels clicking rapidly down my front steps. She pulled the door shut behind her with a definitive slam that rattled the picture frames on my wall. Silence descended on the living room. It was just me and Lily now. The storm had passed, leaving a fragile, terrified child in its wake. I took a deep breath, letting the anger dissolve into professionalism. I needed to make her feel safe. "I am sorry about that, Lily," I said, softening my tone completely. I moved slowly so I would not startle her. "Let us get your coat off. Are you hungry? I have some macaroni and cheese in the fridge, or we could order a pizza." Lily did not move. Her wide blue eyes remained fixed on the door where her father had just disappeared. She stood there shaking so violently that her teeth were actually chattering. It was not from the cold. It was pure, unadulterated terror. "Lily," I asked, taking a cautious step forward, "are you okay?" She slowly turned her gaze to me. She swallowed hard, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. "Aunt Maya," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of my refrigerator. "I need to tell you a secret." I stopped in my tracks. The raw fear in her 10-year-old voice triggered every alarm bell in my head. "What is it, sweetie?" I asked gently. She let go of her backpack straps and slowly unzipped the main compartment. She reached inside her trembling hands, disappearing into the dark fabric. "They are not coming back, Aunt Maya," she whispered, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes and cutting clean paths down her dusty cheeks. "They are never coming back." Before I could process what she was saying, she pulled her hands out of the bag. What she held made my heart stop and my blood run absolutely cold. The object in Lily's hands was a heavy-duty clear plastic freezer bag. It was stuffed to the brim with jagged, uneven strips of thick white paper. Someone had run documents through a cheap cross-cut shredder, but they had not bothered to empty the bin properly. Looking closer, I could see that dozens of the paper strips had been painstakingly aligned and held together with crooked pieces of transparent tape. The sheer desperation required for a 10-year-old child to sit on her bedroom floor and piece together a manic jigsaw puzzle of shredded documents sent a shockwave of protective fury straight down my spine. Lily was trembling so hard that the plastic bag crinkled loudly in the dead silence of my living room. Her knuckles were stark white. I slowly lowered myself to one knee so I was right at her eye level. I kept my hands open and resting them gently on my own thighs. I needed her to know she was safe here in my house. I took a slow, deliberate breath, hoping she would mirror my rhythm. "Let us just take a second, Lily," I said, keeping my voice as soft and steady as I possibly could. "You are safe now. They are gone. Do you want to sit down on the couch? I can heat up that macaroni and cheese I promised, or I can just get you a cold glass of water. We do not have to talk about anything until you are ready." She shook her head violently. Her thin blonde hair whipped across her pale face. The panic in her eyes was sharp and absolute. It was the look of a cornered animal who knew the predator was still lurking nearby. "You do not understand, Aunt Maya," she said, her voice cracking. Her small fingers gripped the plastic bag tighter. They are not going to Paris for a week. They are not going to Europe at all. I frowned, trying to process her words. My forensic accounting brain automatically started sorting the information. Chloe had bragged about Paris for months. She had plastered fake countdowns all over her social media feeds. She had forced our mother to buy her a $1,000 set of vintage French luggage that she conveniently did not bring into my house tonight. "What do you mean they are not going to Paris?" I asked, keeping my tone entirely conversational. "Where did they go, Lily?" Lily held the plastic bag out to me. Her hands shook so much I had to reach out and steady her wrists as I took it. I unzipped the seal. The moment I touched the paper inside, my professional instincts flared to life. This was not regular printer paper. It was heavy bond watermarked stationery, the kind used by high-tier legal firms and offshore banking institutions. I carefully slid out one of the taped-together pages, supporting the fragile seams from behind so it would not fall apart again. The document was a flight itinerary, but it did not bear the logo of any commercial airline. It was a private charter manifest from an executive aviation company operating out of a small airstrip on the outskirts of Atlanta. I scanned the passenger list. There were only two names printed in stark black ink: Connor Sterling and Chloe. There was no child ticket purchased. There was no third seat reserved. I moved my eyes down to the destination. It was not Paris. It was not anywhere in Europe. The charter was flying direct to Georgetown, Grand Cayman, a notorious offshore tax haven, and a jurisdiction known for its incredibly complex financial secrecy laws. I checked the return date section. It was completely blank. This was a one-way ticket. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I could not hide the horror creeping into my chest. Lily swallowed hard. She wrapped her thin arms around her stomach as if trying to hold herself together. "I hide in the air conditioning closet in the hallway when my dad gets angry." She explained, her words spilling out in a rushed, terrified stream. "He has a really bad temper. 2 nights ago I was hiding in the dark and I heard the paper shredder running in his home office. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, after he turned off the lights and went to sleep. I crept into his office and dug through the trash bin. I took the pieces back to my room. I spent the last 2 nights hiding under my blanket with a flashlight, taping them back together." I looked down at the taped page in my hands. The meticulous, terrified effort this child had put into uncovering her own father's betrayal was absolutely heartbreaking. But the nightmare was not over. "There is another paper in the bag," Lily whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the plastic zipper. I reached inside and pulled out a second reconstructed document. It was a formal notice of lease termination. Connor had surrendered the rental property they were living in. He had signed the documents 3 weeks ago, authorizing the landlord to release the security deposit to a routing number I did not recognize. "Lily, what about your things?" I asked, dread settling heavily in my stomach. "What about your clothes and your toys? The moving men came yesterday while I was at school." Lily said, her voice breaking completely. "When I came home, the house was completely empty. Everything was gone. My bed, my bookshelf, my toys, all of it. The only things left were 2 air mattresses on the floor and my dad's suitcases. Chloe told me they were just redecorating and that the old furniture had to be thrown away. She told me to pack my school backpack with a few outfits for my week at your house. That was all they let me take." The sickening reality hit me like a physical blow. The cheap, fraying duffel bag sitting on my rug was not a packing mistake. Chloe's smirk when she said Lily would not be her responsibility anymore was not just her usual brand of toxic cruelty. It was a literal statement of fact. They had not dropped Lily off for a week-long vacation. They had emptied their house, mailed the keys to the landlord, packed up their assets, and bought one-way tickets to the Cayman Islands. They had permanently abandoned a 10-year-old child in my living room and fled the country. They dumped Connor's kid on the family scapegoat. They knew my parents would never check on me. They knew I lived a quiet, isolated life. It was the perfect setup for a clean getaway. But why? Connor projected the image of a wildly successful corporate executive. He drove a leased Maserati and wore bespoke suits. Why would a man like that abandon his biological daughter and flee to an offshore tax haven in the dead of night? People only ran to the Caymans when they were hiding something massive, when they were hiding money that did not belong to them. Lily grabbed my sleeve, snapping me out of my rapid-fire calculations. Her blue eyes were wide and frantic. "Please do not call the police yet." Aunt Maya, she begged, her voice laced with absolute terror. "Please. My dad will hurt me if he finds out I looked through his trash. He told me if I ever snooped in his office, he would send me away to a place where nobody would ever find me. You cannot let him know I told you." The sheer panic radiating from her small body dissolved the last of my professional detachment. The maternal instinct my sister swore I lacked roared to life violently. I dropped the documents onto the coffee table and wrapped my arms around the shaking child, pulling her tightly against my chest. I did not care that my silk blouse was getting wrinkled or that she was crying into my shoulder. I just held her. "I am not going to call the police right now," I promised, smoothing her thin blonde hair. "I will not let him hurt you, Lily. I swear to you right here and now that Connor is never going to lay a hand on you again. You are safe in this house." My analytical brain was already moving 3 steps ahead, plotting a counteroffensive. I needed to understand the scope of the financial crime Connor was committing before I alerted the authorities. If I called the cops now, Connor and Chloe might catch wind of the investigation before their charter landed. They could disappear into the Caribbean banking district and never face justice. I needed hard evidence. I needed the money trail. Lily pulled back slightly, wiping her wet cheeks with the back of her oversized sleeve. She looked up at me with a sudden fierce determination that mirrored my own. "There is one more thing," she said, reaching into the front pocket of her jeans. "I did not just take the paper from the trash. I took something else from his briefcase while he was yelling at the driver outside." She opened her small hand. Resting in her palm was a sleek silver USB drive. The engraved logo on the metal casing made the breath catch in my throat. It was the encrypted hardware token used specifically by elite wealth management firms to authorize massive wire transfers, and I knew exactly how to crack it. I took the sleek silver drive from her small palm. The cold metal felt like a live grenade resting against my skin. I did not say another word to Lily about the documents. She had carried enough of a burden for one night. I walked her to the guest bedroom, turned on the television to a cartoon channel, and pulled a heavy-down comforter over her trembling shoulders. I promised her I would be right across the hall and left the door cracked open so she could see the light from my office. The moment I stepped into my workspace, my entire demeanor shifted. I was no longer just the reliable aunt or the family scapegoat. I was a forensic accountant who had built an independent firm from the ground up in Atlanta. I spent my days tearing apart complex financial webs for high-net-worth clients. I knew how to find hidden money, and I knew exactly how elite wealth managers secured it. I pulled my air-gapped laptop from the biometric safe bolted under my heavy oak desk. This specific machine never touched a public Wi-Fi network. It was impenetrable and completely untraceable. I booted up the system and inserted the silver token. Connor was an arrogant man who projected the image of a corporate titan, but I always suspected he lacked the actual intellect to back it up. He relied on expensive fixers to do his heavy lifting. The hardware token required a secondary alphanumeric passcode to decrypt the master directory. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I knew my sister better than anyone else in the world, despite how much we despised each other. Chloe had a terrifying blend of narcissism and laziness. She used the exact same password for everything since high school. It was our parents' street address in Buckhead, combined with the year she won her high school pageant. I typed the sequence into the prompt. The progress bar flashed green, and the decryption software unlocked. I opened the main directory. The files were organized with meticulous corporate precision. I bypassed the standard tax returns and personal expense folders, clicking directly into a subfolder labeled Sterling Trust. The Sterlings were Lily's maternal grandparents. They were an old money-white family who owned half the commercial real estate in Savannah. They absolutely despised Connor, considering him a fast-talking opportunist who married their daughter for her connections. When Lily's mother tragically passed away a few years ago, the Sterlings set up an ironclad trust fund to protect their granddaughter's future. But as I opened the PDF ledgers, I immediately spotted the fatal structural weakness in the trust agreement. Connor had retained custodial rights over the accounts until Lily turned 18. The Sterlings had likely fought it in court, but custodial law was notoriously difficult to circumvent. Connor had the keys to the kingdom. I opened the transaction history for the past 48 hours, and my eyes scanned the columns of routing numbers. My breath hitched in my throat. $3 million. Every single cent of Lily's inheritance had been liquidated over the course of 2 business days. Connor had not just moved the money, he had run it through a digital blender. I traced the routing codes with growing horror. The funds were bounced from the primary domestic trust account through a newly registered shell company in Delaware. From Delaware, the money was wired to a holding account in Panama before ultimately landing in a private banking institution in Georgetown, Grand Cayman. It was the exact same destination printed on the private charter flight manifest Lily had taped together. Connor had completely drained his own daughter's future to fund his offshore escape with my sister. The sheer magnitude of the theft made my stomach churn, but my professional instincts screamed that something was still missing from this picture. In international wire transfers of this size, commercial banks require a certified third-party authorization. You cannot just move $3 million to a known tax haven without triggering massive federal money laundering alarms. A licensed financial fiduciary has to digitally sign off on the transaction, verifying the legitimacy of the transfer and confirming the identities of the account holders. Connor did not have that kind of clearance, and his usual wealth managers would never risk their federal licenses to facilitate blatant embezzlement. I clicked into the final confirmation receipt attached to the Cayman wire transfer. I scrolled down past the routing numbers and the holding company details to the digital signature line at the bottom of the page. The blood completely drained from my face. The room started to spin, and a sudden wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of my desk to stay upright. Staring back at me from the screen was my own firm's federal tax identification number. Right below it was my personal certified public accountant credential and my secure digital signature. My mind raced backward, replaying every interaction I had with Chloe over the past month. 3 weeks ago, she had dropped by my office unannounced, claiming she needed help formatting a simple tax document for her wedding venue deposit. She had spilled a cup of coffee on my assistant's desk, causing a massive distraction. During the 5 minutes I was out of my office helping my assistant clean up the mess, Chloe had been left completely alone with my unlocked computer. She had not just used my house as a dumping ground for a child she did not want. She had stolen my secure client portal credentials. The reality of the situation crashed over me with suffocating weight. Chloe and Connor did not just abandon Lily to start a new life. They needed a scapegoat. They needed someone to take the fall when the Sterling family inevitably discovered the missing millions. As a Black woman, running an independent financial firm in the South, I knew exactly how the justice system would view this. When the federal investigators looked at the digital trail, they would not see a wealthy white executive stealing from his own daughter. They would see a disgruntled aunt using her professional access to drain a trust fund. The evidence was hardwired into the banking servers. Chloe and Connor had successfully framed me for a $3 million federal wire fraud. I was looking at a decade in federal prison and the complete destruction of the life I had built from nothing. I stared at the blinking cursor on my screen, listening to the faint sound of the cartoon playing in the guest bedroom. My sister had finally done it. She had handed me a death sentence wrapped in a cheap duffel bag. I stared at my computer screen, watching the digital footprint of my own destruction. The blinking cursor felt like a countdown clock ticking away the final seconds of my freedom. I did not panic. Panic was for people who did not understand the math. I understood the math perfectly. $3 million stolen from a child and routed through offshore accounts with my digital signature attached meant federal prison. I reached for my phone, my hands moving with a cold mechanical precision. I dialed the only people who could possibly reel Chloe back in before the federal authorities caught wind of this massive financial crater. My parents, DeAndre and Valerie, were practically royalty in the affluent circles of Buckhead. It was a Friday afternoon, which meant they were holding court at their exclusive country club. They spent their days sipping premium cocktails and maintaining a flawless social facade. I listened to the phone ring, picturing my mother sitting at a linen-draped table surrounded by other wealthy wives. Valerie answered on the 4th ring, her voice clipped and dripping with immediate irritation. "Maya, I am right in the middle of a charity luncheon." I told you never to call me during my social hours unless someone is in the hospital. Someone is going to federal prison, mother, I said, keeping my voice absolutely flat. Your golden child just dumped Connor's 10-year-old daughter in my living room with a cheap bag and no winter coat. They emptied their rental house and fled the country. There was a brief pause on the line. I could hear the faint clinking of fine china and the soft murmur of jazz music in the background. Then my mother let out a sharp, exasperated sigh. Are you listening to yourself, Maya? She scolded, her tone instantly shifting into the patronizing cadence she had used on me since childhood. You always have to be so dramatic. Chloe and Connor simply took a spontaneous romantic getaway to celebrate their engagement. Connor is a very busy man, and he needs to decompress. You should be happy your sister trusts you enough to watch her future stepdaughter for a few days. They did not take a romantic getaway. I fired back, gripping the edge of my desk. They took a one-way private charter to the Cayman Islands. They abandoned Lily entirely. But that is not even the worst part. Connor drained $3 million from Lily's maternal trust fund. He stole his own daughter's inheritance and Chloe helped him do it. The line went dead quiet for a second. I expected shock. I expected a mother's horror at realizing her youngest daughter was an accomplice to grand larceny. Instead, I heard my mother take a slow, deliberate sip of her drink. You are deeply unwell, Maya Valerie said, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper, meant to ensure her country club friends could not overhear. You have always been jealous of your sister. From the day she brought Connor home, you have tried to find a way to tear him down. Connor is a prominent investor. He manages high-level portfolios. If he is moving money around, it is because he knows exactly what he is doing. He is moving stolen money, I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. He embezzled millions from a 10-year-old child. And Chloe stole my certified public accountant credentials to authorize the offshore wire transfer. They framed my firm, mother. They forged my digital signature to make it look like I orchestrated the entire theft. Another sigh echoed through the phone. This one was heavier, laden with profound disappointment. Maya listened to me very carefully, Valerie said, enunciating every word as if she were speaking to a slow toddler. Chloe mentioned to me last week that she might need to borrow your little tax software. She said Connor was expediting some of their honeymoon funds and needed a secure portal to bypass some tedious banking delays. I stopped breathing. The sterile air in my office suddenly felt too thick to inhale. You knew, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You knew she was going to access my professional network. I knew she needed a favor, Valerie snapped. And frankly, you should be honoring that request without throwing a hysterical fit. You run a tiny independent bookkeeping business. Connor operates in the major leagues of finance. If he needed to use your credentials to bypass some bureaucratic red tape, you should be thanking your sister for bringing such high-level business into your orbit. It is not red tape, I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. It is a federal crime. They framed me for wire fraud. I will lose my license. I will lose my business. I could go to prison for a decade. Stop being so self-centered, Valerie hissed. You are deliberately trying to ruin your sister's happiness just because your own life is empty. You sit alone in that sterile townhouse day after day, pushing papers around while Chloe is out building a beautiful life with a wealthy, successful white man. You have always been bitter, Maya. Ever since you were a teenager, you could never just let Chloe shine. You always had to cast a dark cloud over her achievements. The sheer audacity of her gaslighting was breathtaking. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. She was taking a literal felony and twisting it into a narrative about my supposed jealousy. This was exactly how she and my father had operated my entire life. When Chloe wrecked a car in high school, it was my fault for not driving her. When Chloe failed out of her first semester of college, it was my fault for not tutoring her. Now Chloe was an accessory to multi-million-dollar embezzlement, and my mother was blaming me for not being grateful enough to take the fall. I am not being dramatic, I said, my voice dropping to a dead calm register. I have the flight manifests. I have the shredded lease termination papers. I have the digital receipts showing the money moving from the Sterling Family Trust into a Cayman Islands shell company. I am calling the authorities right now. You will do no such thing, Valerie commanded, her voice slicing through the phone with absolute venom. You will not call the police. You will not call the bank. You will sit there and watch that little girl until Chloe and Connor return. Do you have any idea how much money and effort your father and I have invested in this wedding? Do you know who is on the guest list? Half the city council and the entire board of the country club. I will not have you humiliating this family because you cannot handle your own professional insecurities. I looked out the door of my office toward the guest bedroom where Lily was hiding. A child had been discarded like garbage, so my sister could fund a luxury life offshore, and my mother was worried about a wedding guest list. They are not returning, mother, I said, pronouncing each syllable with absolute finality. They stole $3 million and ran. They left Connor's daughter with nothing but a backpack of shredded evidence. If you do not help me stop them, the Federal Bureau of Investigation will be knocking on your mansion door next. Do not threaten me with the authorities, you ungrateful girl, Valerie snarled. You think anyone is going to believe you over Connor. He is a respected businessman with deep ties to the financial sector. You are just a bitter single black woman trying to tear down her sister's fiancé out of sheer spite. If you drag the police into this, they will look at your signature on those transfers and they will lock you up. And let me make this perfectly clear, Maya. If you try to drag Chloe down with you, I will personally make sure you never work in this city again. I will tell every client you have that you are mentally unstable and prone to fabricating financial records. The betrayal was absolute. It was not just that my mother refused to believe me. It was that she actively understood the situation and was actively choosing to sacrifice me to protect Chloe's affluent facade. She was willing to let me face federal prison just to ensure her golden child did not experience a moment of discomfort. Hold on a minute. Valerie muttered, her tone shifting abruptly from vicious to accommodating as she spoke to someone else nearby. DeAndre, take the phone. Your daughter is having another one of her hysterical episodes and I simply cannot deal with this while my soup is getting cold. I heard the rustle of the phone changing hands. The clinking of country club silverware echoed through the speaker as my father brought the receiver to his ear. I stood perfectly still in my home office, bracing myself for the next wave of the assault. I had just realized my mother was perfectly fine watching me burn to the ground. Now I was about to find out exactly how much gasoline my father was willing to pour on the fire. Maya, what exactly is the problem here? My father DeAndre spoke with the smooth, practiced baritone that made him a titan in Atlanta real estate. He did not sound panicked. He did not sound horrified that his future son-in-law had just abandoned a child. He sounded like a chief executive officer dealing with a subordinate who had mishandled a minor public relations issue. I took a slow breath, forcing my heart rate to steady. The problem, Dad, is that your future son-in-law just executed a multi-million-dollar heist. He drained Lily's trust fund and used my professional credentials to do it. He forged my digital signature. They framed me for a federal crime and fled to a tax haven. There was a brief silence on the line. I could hear him walking away from the busy dining area of the country club, his heavy leather shoes stepping onto the quiet outdoor terrace. When he spoke again, his voice was low, calculating, and entirely devoid of paternal warmth. Let us not use words like heist and fraud, Maya, DeAndre said calmly. Connor is an aggressive investor. He takes calculated risks. He likely identified a high-yield offshore opportunity and needed to move quickly before the market shifted. If he bypassed some standard banking protocols to secure the family's financial future, we can manage the fallout. You are an accountant. You know how to balance the books. I stared at the wall of my office, completely stunned by his casual dismissal of a literal felony. Balance the books. I repeated, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Dad, he did not bypass a protocol. He stole $3 million from a 10-year-old girl. He abandoned her in my living room with nothing but a garbage bag full of shredded documents. There is no high-yield investment. He is running from his debts and he is using my name as his human shield. Then fix the paperwork, Maya. My father snapped, his patience clearly thinning. You own the firm. You control the client portal. Create a retroactive advisory contract. Draft a document stating you authorized a temporary liquidity transfer under his direction as the custodial parent. Make the paperwork match the transaction. You are asking me to become an active co-conspirator, I said, gripping the phone so hard my fingers ached. You are asking me to legitimize grand larceny. If the federal authorities audit that transfer and see a backdated contract, I will lose my certified public accountant license. I will lose my business. I will be indicted. DeAndre let out a heavy sigh, the kind of sigh a disappointed teacher gives a failing student. Let us look at the board, Maya, he said, shifting into pure negotiation mode. Chloe is marrying a man with significant social and financial influence. They are building a life together. They are going to give your mother and me grandchildren to carry on our legacy. You chose a different path. You chose to isolate yourself with your career. You do not have a husband to embarrass. You do not have children to traumatize. The air left my lungs. The room suddenly felt freezing cold. What are you saying? I asked, my voice dropping to a hollow whisper. I am saying we need to protect the family, DeAndre stated, operating with brutal corporate logic. If a federal agency starts asking questions about this transfer, a white-collar investigation will completely destroy Connor's reputation. It will ruin Chloe's life. The society pages in Atlanta would tear your mother and me apart. We would be a laughingstock at the country club. But you, Maya, you have always been the tough one. You are independent. You are built to handle pressure. If the auditors come knocking, you are in the best position to absorb the impact. Absorb the impact. I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. You want me to take the fall. You want me to confess to wire fraud so your favorite daughter can sip champagne on a stolen yacht. It is a minor regulatory issue. DeAndre countered smoothly, minimizing the danger just like he always did when Chloe was in trouble. You claim full responsibility. You tell the investigators you pushed a rogue investment strategy on Connor and executed the transfer yourself without his full understanding of the offshore implications. We will hire the most aggressive defense attorneys in the state of Georgia to represent you. We will pay every single legal fee. If worst comes to worst and you have to serve a little time in a minimum security facility, we will make sure you are extremely comfortable. I will personally set up an irrevocable trust for you when you get out. Consider it a highly paid, prolonged sabbatical. I stood frozen in my home office, listening to my own father negotiate the terms of my incarceration. The gaslighting was so profound, so completely devoid of human empathy, that it actually took my breath away. My entire existence in their eyes was nothing more than a contingency plan for Chloe's mistakes. When Chloe wrecked a car in college, they made me take the blame for leaving the keys out. When Chloe failed out of her master's program, they blamed me for not tutoring her enough. Now Chloe was an accessory to multi-million-dollar embezzlement, and my father was actively ordering me to go to federal prison to protect her social calendar. You are out of your mind, I said, my voice vibrating with a cold, dangerous clarity. You are asking me to throw away a decade of my hard work to forfeit my freedom and destroy my name, just so you do not have to feel embarrassed at a charity gala. I am telling you to do your duty to this family. DeAndre growled, his corporate mask finally slipping to reveal the ruthless dictator underneath. You owe us, Maya. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. You have spent your entire adult life pushing us away, acting like you are superior just because you run a little bookkeeping shop. This is your chance to actually contribute something of value to our legacy. You have no legacy, Dad, I fired back. You have a fake empire built on appearances and a golden child who just committed a federal crime. Connor is broke, he is a fraud, and the money he stole belongs to the Sterling family. Do you really think old money white elites like the Sterlings are just going to let $3 million vanish? They are going to rain hellfire down on anyone connected to this transfer. DeAndre scoffed dismissively. I can handle the Sterlings. What I cannot handle is an ungrateful daughter trying to sabotage her sister out of sheer vindictiveness. Let me make this incredibly clear for you, Maya. If you go to the police, if you blow the whistle on Connor and drag Chloe into a criminal investigation, I will destroy you. I will personally ensure your firm is buried in civil litigation. I will call every client on your roster and tell them you are under federal investigation for mismanaging funds. I will bankrupt you before the trial even starts. Do not test me. I looked out the open door of my office. Across the hallway, I could see the soft, flickering light of the television in the guest bedroom. Lily was curled into a tight ball under the blankets, a discarded child left behind by a father who only cared about his own comfort. I realized in that exact moment that my parents were no different than Connor. They were entirely willing to sacrifice a child to serve their own selfish needs. You just made the biggest miscalculation of your entire career, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a dead calm register that made the line go silent. You assumed I would stay loyal to a family that never loved me. You assumed I would play the good little scapegoat and fall on my sword for a sister who despises me. Maya, do not do anything stupid, DeAndre warned, a sudden flicker of actual concern finally breaching his arrogant tone. I am not taking the fall, I said, gripping the phone tightly. I am not absorbing the impact. I am bringing the entire structure down on top of your heads. I slammed the phone down onto the receiver, cutting off his voice completely. I stood in the silence of my office, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The lines were drawn. The war was officially declared. I was completely on my own, facing down a federal frame-up and my own ruthless parents. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. I was the one holding the digital evidence, and I knew exactly how to use it. I barely had a second to process the dial tone ringing in my ear after hanging up on my father. Before I could even step out of my home office to check on Lily, a sound like a battering ram echoed through the first floor of my townhouse. It was not a polite knock. It was a violent rhythmic pounding that rattled the glass in my front windows and sent a shockwave through the floorboards. Atlanta Police Department, open the door immediately. My blood turned to ice. I dropped my phone onto the desk and sprinted down the hallway. I could hear Lily let out a sharp, terrified gasp from the guest bedroom. I shouted for her to stay put and hurried to the foyer. I did not even have time to unlock the deadbolt before the heavy wooden door was shoved inward, forcing me to stumble backward to avoid being hit. Two people stepped over my threshold, completely invading my sanctuary. The first was a uniformed police officer, with his hand resting cautiously near his utility belt, his eyes scanning the room for immediate threats. The second was a severe-looking woman in a cheap gray pantsuit clutching a thick clipboard to her chest. She had the unmistakable, exhausted yet deeply judgmental posture of a county social worker who had already decided I was guilty. "You are Maya," the woman demanded, her eyes narrowing as she looked me up and down. "I am Agent Jenkins with Fulton County Child Protective Services. We received an emergency priority tip regarding the welfare of a minor currently on these premises." I stood my ground, forcing my spine perfectly straight despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "I am Maya. I am a certified public accountant, and this is my private residence. You do not have the right to force your way into my home without a warrant." The police officer stepped forward, projecting a solid wall of intimidation. "We have exigent circumstances, ma'am." The hotline report was highly specific. We were informed that a 10-year-old girl named Lily Sterling was forcibly removed from her home and is being held here against the consent of her custodial parent. The words hit me like a physical strike to the chest. Kidnapping. They were actually accusing me of kidnapping. Agent Jenkins flipped open her clipboard, tapping her pen against the paper. "The anonymous reporter stated that you are currently under investigation for a massive federal financial scam. The claim is that you abducted your sister's future stepdaughter to use as leverage or a human shield while you attempt to move illicit funds out of the country. We are here to take the child into immediate state custody for her own protection. Where is she?" My forensic accounting brain immediately dissected the entire scenario, piecing the brutal logic together in a fraction of a second. Connor. It was Connor. Framing me for the $3 million wire fraud was not enough for him. He needed to tie up the only loose end that could possibly expose his flight to the Cayman Islands. Lily knew they had shredded the lease. Lily knew they had packed up the entire house and fled. If Lily managed to call her wealthy maternal grandparents, the Sterling family would have high-powered private investigators hunting Connor down within the hour. But if Connor called Child Protective Services from the airport and spun a frantic lie about an unhinged aunt kidnapping his daughter, he accomplished two things at once. He solidified his frame job by painting me as a desperate, dangerous criminal. And much more importantly, he guaranteed that Lily would be swallowed whole by the chronically overwhelmed Atlanta foster care system. A terrified 10-year-old girl, lost in the relentless bureaucracy of group homes and emergency county placements, would not be able to contact anyone. She would be completely silenced while Connor and Chloe lived like royalty on a Caribbean beach. The sheer sociopathic brilliance of the plan made my stomach turn. My sister was marrying an absolute monster, and my parents were completely ready to sacrifice me just to protect him. "You are operating on incredibly false information, Agent Jenkins," I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm and completely devoid of the hysteria they were clearly expecting from a cornered suspect. "I did not abduct anyone. Lily was dropped off at my house 2 hours ago by her father Connor and my sister Chloe. They left her here with a single duffel bag before boarding a private charter out of the country." Agent Jenkins scoffed a harsh, dismissive sound that echoed off my high ceilings. "That contradicts the detailed timeline we were provided. The caller stated you showed up at their residence causing a violent disturbance and took the child. We are not here to debate your financial crimes, Maya. We are here to secure the minor. Now, are you going to bring her out, or do we need to search the premises?" Before I could form a barricade with my own body, I heard the soft padding of socked feet against the hardwood floor. I turned my head. Lily was standing at the edge of the hallway. Her face was entirely drained of color. She was clutching the doorframe, her small knuckles stark white with absolute terror. She looked at the police officer and began to shake violently. "There she is," the officer said, taking a heavy step forward into my living room. I immediately threw my arm out, blocking his path. "Do not take another step toward her," I commanded, my voice cracking like a whip. I dropped the polite professional tone entirely. "You are terrifying a child who has already been abandoned today." Agent Jenkins stepped around the officer, plastering a fake soothing smile on her face that did not reach her eyes. "Hello, Lily. My name is Agent Jenkins. You do not need to be afraid anymore. We are going to take you to a safe place right now. Go grab your things, honey." Lily let out a ragged sob and sprinted directly behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist and burying her face into my spine. She was trembling so hard, my own body shook with the force of it. "No," she cried out, her voice muffled against my clothes. "Please do not let them take me, Aunt Maya. My dad said if I was bad, the state people would come and lock me in a cage. Please do not let them take me." The profound cruelty of Connor's parenting style was suddenly on full display. He had weaponized the foster system to keep his daughter terrified and compliant long before today. He had planted those seeds of fear specifically for a moment like this. Agent Jenkins lost her fake smile instantly. She pointed her pen directly at my chest. "Maya, you are interfering with a child welfare extraction. If you do not step aside and release the child to my custody, the officer will place you under arrest for obstruction and kidnapping. You are looking at a minimum of 20 years in state prison before the federal financial charges even hit your desk." I looked Agent Jenkins dead in the eye, refusing to blink. "You are being played," I told her, my tone laced with absolute certainty. "The man who called in that tip is currently committing grand larceny and fleeing the jurisdiction. If you take this child out of my house, you are delivering the only witness to his crimes directly into a bureaucratic black hole." "I do not care about your conspiracy theories," the agent snapped, her patience entirely gone. "Officer, secure the minor." The police officer reached for his radio, ready to call for backup. The heavy boots against my floorboards sounded like a countdown. I had exactly 5 seconds before they put their hands on me and dragged Lily out the door, screaming. I needed a legal shield, and I needed it instantly. I could not fight a county worker and an armed officer with just logic and a bag of shredded documents. "You touch me or this child, and I guarantee you will both be standing in the unemployment line by Monday morning," I stated, projecting an authority I had spent years cultivating in ruthless corporate boardrooms. Agent Jenkins laughed a dry, humorless sound. "You are a suspected kidnapper. You have no rights here. I am a licensed fiduciary with temporary legal guardianship of this child." I lied smoothly, my brain racing at lightning speed to buy time. "If you remove a child from a legally designated guardian without a court order signed by a judge, you are committing a massive civil rights violation." "Where is the paperwork proving guardianship?" Agent Jenkins demanded, holding out her hand, expecting me to fold. "Produce a signed proxy form right now, or she comes with us." I felt Lily's grip tighten around my waist. I did not have a notarized form in my hand, but I knew exactly how Chloe operated. I knew she never read the fine print when she was in a rush to get what she wanted. And I knew the only person ruthless enough to stop a Child Protective Services extraction in its tracks was currently sitting 3 miles away, sipping a bourbon in her penthouse. I reached slowly into my pocket, keeping my movements visible to the officer. I pulled out my phone and held it up. You want paperwork, Agent Jenkins? Fine. Give me exactly 3 minutes to call my corporate defense attorney. Because if you try to take this girl out of my house without a judge's signature, my lawyer is going to personally sue the county, the department, and both of you for everything you own. The officer hesitated, glancing sideways at the social worker. Agent Jenkins crossed her arms, her jaw tight with irritation. You have 3 minutes, Maya. Make the call, and then we are taking the girl. I dialed the number, praying my best friend was awake. The line rang once. The trap was set and I was about to blow the whole thing wide open. I dialed Tara. The line did not even finish its first ring before she answered. Tara lived exactly 4 units down in our gated townhouse community. She was a senior partner at a ruthless corporate defense firm downtown, and she was the only person in Atlanta who matched my exact level of calculated hostility. Get to my house right now, I said into the receiver, my voice hard and loud enough for the police officer to hear. County Child Services and an armed officer just kicked my door in without a warrant. They are trying to illegally extract my niece based on a fraudulent anonymous tip. I am walking out my door right now, Tara replied, her tone instantly dropping into courtroom mode. Do not let them cross the threshold of that hallway. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my pocket. I kept my body positioned squarely between the heavy tactical boots of the police officer and the trembling frame of a 10-year-old girl. You have exactly 2 minutes and 45 seconds before my legal counsel walks through that door, I told Agent Jenkins. I highly suggest you use that time to reconsider your employment status, because if you lay a hand on this child without a court order, you will be personally named in a federal civil rights lawsuit. Agent Jenkins narrowed her eyes, her face flushing an angry mottled red. You think you can intimidate me with a lawyer, Maya? I handle uncooperative relatives every single day. Officer, we are not waiting. Secure the child. The officer took a heavy step forward, reaching toward my shoulder to physically move me aside. Do not even think about extending that arm, officer. The voice cracked through my living room like a physical whip. Tara stood in my open doorway. She was wearing a flawless crimson silk suit and holding a leather briefcase like a weapon. She did not walk into my house, she invaded it. I am Tara Covington, Senior Defense Counsel and Acting Attorney for the homeowner, Tara announced, striding directly between the police officer and me. She pulled a gold-plated pen from her pocket and pointed it directly at the officer's badge. Name and badge number right now. You are currently trespassing on private property without a signed judicial warrant based on an unverified anonymous hotline tip. The officer instinctively took a step back, his hand dropping away from my shoulder. Ma'am, we received a priority 1 kidnapping call. And I received a call about an illegal home invasion conducted by county officials. Tara snapped back, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. Let us review the law, since Fulton County clearly skipped that training module. You cannot bypass the Fourth Amendment to extract a child unless there is visible immediate physical danger. Do you see any physical danger, officer? Because all I see is a certified public accountant protecting her terrified niece from a completely unwarranted state-sanctioned abduction. Agent Jenkins puffed out her chest, trying to regain control of the room. The father reported that the child was taken against his will. The aunt has no legal right to house this minor. We are taking custody to prevent a flight risk. I felt a cold smile pull at the corner of my mouth. That was the fatal flaw in Connor's brilliant little frame job. He assumed I was just like his useless fiancée. He assumed I did not read the fine print. You are dead wrong about my legal rights, Agent Jenkins, I said, keeping my voice dangerously smooth. I reached behind me and opened the top drawer of my entryway console table. When Chloe dropped Lily off, she was so desperate to catch her private charter to the Caymans that she complained about the school requiring emergency contact forms. I told her I printed the school documents and needed her to sign them before she left. Chloe was too busy fixing her lipstick in the mirror to read the header on the document. She just grabbed my pen and scribbled her signature at the bottom of the page. I pulled the crisp white document from the drawer and handed it directly to Tara. Tara scanned the page and let out a sharp, victorious laugh. She shoved the paper directly into the social worker's face. Read it and weep, Agent Jenkins, Tara commanded. This is not a school permission slip. This is a comprehensive temporary guardianship authorization. It includes full medical proxy educational rights and temporary legal custody of Lily granted to Maya. It is signed by the custodial stepmother, who acts as a legal guardian under Georgia state law. This document is valid for 14 days. My client is not a kidnapper. She is the legally designated guardian. Agent Jenkins snatched the paper, her eyes darting across the legal jargon. The color rapidly drained from her face as she realized the massive mistake she had just made. This signature could be forged, the agent stammered, trying desperately to cling to her authority. The father specifically stated the child was taken by force. We still have a frightened minor who needs to be interviewed away from the accused. Before Tara could launch another verbal assault, I felt small hands release their death grip on my shirt. Lily stepped out from behind my back. She was still shaking, but she stood incredibly tall for a 10-year-old girl. She looked directly at the social worker. "My Aunt Maya did not kidnap me," Lily said, her voice ringing clear and steady in the silent room. "My dad left me here. He packed up all our furniture in a big truck while I was at school, and then he brought me here with just one bag of clothes. He and Chloe got on an airplane and left me." The police officer shifted his weight, looking highly uncomfortable. "Are you sure about that, sweetheart?" the officer asked gently. "Your dad said he was looking for you." "My dad is a liar," Lily stated, gripping the hem of her oversized sweater. "He told me if I was ever bad, he would call the state people to come lock me in a cage. That is why you are here, because I found his shredded papers in the trash and he knows I found them. I am terrified of my father. I do not want to go with you. I want to stay with Aunt Maya. She is the only one who keeps me safe." The absolute conviction in the child's voice completely shattered the social worker's case. Agent Jenkins looked at the legal guardianship form in her hand, then down at the terrified but resolute little girl. The entire foundation of Connor's anonymous tip had just evaporated into thin air. Tara stepped forward, invading the agent's personal space. "You have a legally binding guardianship document and a direct testimony from the minor confirming abandonment by the primary parent. If you attempt to remove this child from this house, now it is considered state-sponsored kidnapping. I will have your badge, Jenkins. I will personally drag you into a civil courtroom and bankrupt you. Now get out of my client's house." The police officer had heard enough. He nodded to Tara, then turned to the social worker. "We are done here, Agent Jenkins. The child is legally housed and denies the abduction. We do not have probable cause to stay." Agent Jenkins shoved the guardianship form back into Tara's hand, her face twisting with bitter frustration. She glared at me, her eyes full of venom. "This is a temporary paper shield, Maya. The father is still the primary custodial parent. If he files a formal petition with the family court, this little document will not protect you for long. You are on the radar now. The clock is ticking." I watched them walk out of my house, the heavy wooden door clicking shut behind them. I locked the deadbolt and engaged the security chain. The immediate threat was gone, but Agent Jenkins was right about one thing. The clock was absolutely ticking. Connor had tried to use the foster system as a weapon to silence his own daughter. He had tried to have me arrested to cover up a $3 million theft. I turned to look at Tara, my best friend, matching my cold, calculating gaze. "They tried to take her," I whispered, the reality of the situation cementing itself in my bones. "They tried to throw a child to the wolves to buy themselves time." Tara crossed her arms over her crimson suit. "So what is the play, Maya? Because defense is not going to cut it anymore." I walked past her, heading straight for my home office, where my encrypted laptop was still running the offshore bank traces. "We do not play defense," I said, pulling the chair out and sitting down at the glowing screen. "We follow the money, and then we burn their entire escape route straight to the ground. Let me show you what Connor is really hiding. All those millions in the Caymans do not belong to him, and I am about to make sure he never touches a single dime of it." It was time to unleash the full force of my forensic expertise. Connor thought he had buried his tracks under layers of digital security and corporate privilege. He forgot that I was the one who built the system he was trying to hide in. I cracked my knuckles and began typing. The real war had just begun. I pulled up the second chair in my office, and Tara sank into it, crossing her legs and leaning her elbows on the edge of my heavy oak desk. The soft glow of the monitor illuminated the sharp angles of her face as we stared at the transaction ledger. Forensic accounting is not just about crunching numbers, It is about human behavior. People can lie with their words, they can lie with their tailored suits, and they can lie with their perfectly curated social media profiles, but they can never lie with their bank statements. The math always tells the absolute truth. I cracked my knuckles and went to work. I did not bother with the standard banking portals. Those were designed for casual users and front-end tellers. I bypassed the commercial interface entirely, pulling up a specialized diagnostic software my firm used for deep-dive corporate audits. I needed to see the raw metadata attached to the $3 million wire transfer. Every digital transaction leaves a fingerprint. It logs the IP address, the exact timestamp, the network routing pathway, and the specific terminal where the authorization originated. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling the Swift code data and cross-referencing the origin accounts. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a string of alphanumeric characters, lighting up the screen. Connor did not just move this money from a standard savings account. He initiated a full liquidation of a highly restricted custodial portfolio. Tara leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. "What kind of portfolio, Maya?" I ran the routing number through a federal registry database. The screen populated with a long list of legal designations and corporate trustees. "It is a generational wealth vehicle," I explained, my voice tight with disgust. "The primary beneficiary is listed as Lily Sterling. The original grantors are Arthur and Eleanor Sterling." Tara let out a low whistle of recognition. "The Savannah Sterlings?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Old money real estate moguls. They practically own the entire historic district down the coast. I have faced their corporate lawyers in court before. They are absolute sharks who do not take prisoners." "Exactly," I said, tracing the digital pathway with my cursor. "When Lily's mother passed away, the Sterlings locked this money down tight. They clearly knew Connor was a grifter. The trust was structured so that Lily would gain access to the principal on her 18th birthday. The only way to crack the vault early was through a highly specific custodial loophole requiring dual authorization. Connor needed a licensed fiduciary to digitally swear under penalty of perjury that the funds were being transferred to a secure tax-advantaged educational trust. Instead, he used my stolen credentials to route it to a shell company in Delaware and then offshore to the Cayman Islands. Tara concluded, her jaw tightening with anger. "He is going to leave you holding the bag when the Sterling family unleashes their legal team. They will absolutely destroy your firm, Maya." "They would certainly try," I agreed, but Connor made one massive miscalculation. He thought he was smarter than me. I minimized the transaction window and opened a comprehensive background check portal. My firm paid thousands of dollars a month for access to deep financial surveillance databases. I punched in Connor's social security number from the trust documents and hit execute. If a man is moving $3 million to a tax haven, he is running from something equally massive. I wanted to see the monster hiding behind the custom-tailored suits and the shiny Maserati. The database churned for exactly 10 seconds before flooding my screen with red flags. The financial alerts cascaded down the monitor like a digital bloodbath. I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Oh my God, Tara. Look at this. He is not a prominent investor. He is a walking financial corpse." Tara leaned over my shoulder, her eyes widening as she read the escalating list of defaults. "He does not have a job," she whispered, reading the employment history log. "He was terminated with cause from his investment firm 14 months ago." "It gets better," I said, scrolling down the page. "Look at his debt-to-income ratio. He has 4 different platinum credit cards entirely maxed out. He is 90 days past due on his luxury car lease. He has a second mortgage on that rental house he just abandoned, and 3 outstanding personal loans from high-interest private lenders. The man does not have 2 dimes to rub together. He is completely bankrupt." The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with sickening clarity. Connor had spent the last year playing the role of a highly successful corporate titan while secretly drowning in an ocean of debt. He knew his creditors were closing in. He knew the facade was about to shatter, and he would be exposed as a penniless fraud. He needed an exit strategy, and he needed a mark. He found the perfect target in my sister. I explained the profound reality of my family's ignorance washing over me. "Chloe is so desperate for status and wealth that she never bothered to look past the Rolex and the expensive dinners. And my parents, DeAndre and Valerie, are so obsessed with social climbing that they practically handed her over to him. They wanted a wealthy white son-in-law to parade around the Buckhead Country Club so badly that they never even thought to run a basic background check. Connor played all of them like a cheap fiddle. Tara shook her head in disbelief. So he seduces Chloe, promises her a lavish life in Paris, and convinces her to help him steal his daughter's inheritance. He manipulates her into stealing your accounting credentials because he knows your parents will always force you to take the blame to protect their golden child. It is the perfect crime, I said, my voice dropping to a cold mechanical register. He gets $3 million tax-free. Chloe gets her fantasy life abroad. They abandon a 10-year-old child who knows too much. And the scapegoat sister rots in federal prison while the Sterling family extracts their vengeance. Tara stood up and began pacing the length of my office, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Maya, we have to call the Federal Bureau of Investigation right now. We have to report the wire fraud before that money clears the Cayman clearinghouse. If those funds settle into a decentralized offshore account, they will be gone forever, and the feds will come knocking on your door by Monday morning. I stared at the transaction metadata on my screen. The $3 million was currently sitting in a digital purgatory. It had cleared the Delaware holding company and hit the Panamanian relay server. International transfers of this magnitude required a 48-hour holding period before final settlement in the Caymans. The money was effectively floating in the atmosphere, suspended between jurisdictions. If I called the federal authorities right now, they would freeze the transfer, but the ensuing bureaucratic nightmare would take months to untangle. I would be dragged into endless interrogations. My firm would be audited. My assets would be seized during the investigation. Connor and Chloe might even have enough time to slip out of the Paris airport and disappear into a non-extradition country before the agents could secure international arrest warrants. I was not going to let a government agency dictate the terms of my survival. I was not going to let Connor walk away from the destruction he had caused. And I was absolutely not going to let my parents maintain their pristine social facade after they actively tried to sacrifice me to federal prison. I am not calling the police just yet, I told Tara, my fingers resting lightly on the keyboard. Are you out of your mind? Tara demanded, stopping her pacing and staring at me like I had lost my grip on reality. You have the evidence, Maya. Hand it over to the authorities and clear your name. If I hand it over now, Connor and Chloe might slip through the cracks, I explained, turning to look at my best friend. They are sitting in a first-class lounge in Paris right now, thinking they have won. They think they are untouchable. I want them to feel the exact same terror Lily felt when they abandoned her. I want them to realize they messed with the wrong forensic accountant. Tara crossed her arms, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. What exactly are you going to do, Maya? I am going to use my credentials to trigger a Tier 1 federal cybercrime alert directly on that transaction, I said, turning back to the glowing screen. I am going to manually flag the routing number as a hostile corporate breach. The international banking system will immediately freeze the funds in transit. Connor's offshore accounts will be locked down tighter than a military vault. Tara let out a sharp laugh. He is going to try to withdraw that money the second he lands, and he is going to find out his accounts are frozen solid. He will be stranded with no cash and no escape route. Exactly, I said, cracking my knuckles one final time. They wanted to use my digital signature to steal a fortune. Now they are going to find out exactly how much power that signature really holds. I am going to cut the financial cord while they are 30,000 feet in the air. I moved my mouse over the security portal, ready to initiate the total destruction of Connor's master plan. The trap was fully constructed and it was time to pull the lever. I looked at Tara and explained the harsh reality of federal banking laws. If I picked up the phone and called the authorities right now, I would be handing them a perfectly wrapped conviction with my name on it. Connor had structured the wire transfer so flawlessly that my digital signature was the undisputed anchor of the entire transaction. The federal agents would not care about my stolen credentials or a frightened 10-year-old girl hiding in my guest bedroom. They would see a certified public accountant moving $3 million to a tax haven, and they would arrest me on the spot. By the time my defense attorneys untangled the truth, Connor would have drained the offshore account and vanished completely. Tara narrowed her eyes, her brilliant legal mind instantly seeing the trap. So if you cannot call law enforcement, how do you stop a transaction that is already processing through international servers? You do not call the police, I said, turning back to my encrypted laptop. You call the money. I opened the master administrative portal for my financial firm. This was the absolute nuclear option. As a licensed fiduciary, I had the authority to trigger a universal stop payment protocol under the International Cybercrime Banking Statutes. It was a failsafe designed for massive corporate breaches. If I flagged the transfer as a hostile network intrusion, the SWIFT banking system would automatically freeze the assets in transit. The funds would be locked in a digital vault, and the destination accounts would be instantly flagged by global financial regulators. But there was a massive catch. Initiating a Tier 1 federal security freeze required me to report my own firm as fully compromised. It would trigger an automatic regulatory audit of every single account I managed. My business would be effectively paralyzed for months. I would lose prestigious clients. I would lose substantial revenue. I was about to detonate a bomb inside my own career just to stop Connor from getting away with his heist. Are you absolutely sure about this? Maya Tara asked, her voice low and serious. The fallout from this kind of institutional lockdown is going to be brutal. Your parents are already threatening to ruin your reputation in Atlanta. This will give them the exact ammunition they need to do it. My parents have been trying to destroy my self-worth since I was old enough to walk, I replied, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Let them try to destroy my business. I can rebuild a financial firm. I cannot rebuild a child who gets swallowed by the foster system. Connor tried to use my name to steal Lily's future. Now I am using my name to financially execute him. I initiated the override sequence. The screen prompted me for a secondary biometric verification. I pressed my thumb against the scanner built into my desk. The system accepted my print and opened the international routing ledger. I found the $3 million transfer sitting idle in the Panamanian relay server, waiting for the 48-hour clearance window to drop into the Cayman Island accounts. I selected the entire transaction block. The interface asked for a mandatory reason code. I typed in hostile identity theft and unauthorized corporate credential breach. Connor thought he was an absolute genius. He thought he could buy a one-way private charter to the Caribbean while sending his oblivious fiancée to Paris as a decoy. He likely planned to ditch Chloe the second the money cleared. That was the only reason Chloe would have bragged so loudly about Europe to everyone at the country club. He bought her a commercial first-class ticket to France to keep up her social media illusion while he prepared to disappear with the cash. But Connor did not understand the velocity of an international banking freeze. When you trigger a Tier 1 cybercrime alert on a wire transfer, the system does not just stop the money. It blacklists the individuals attached to the destination accounts. It instantly flags their passports and freezes every single credit card, debit card, and liquid asset tied to their social security numbers globally. It is an absolute financial quarantine. I took a deep breath. I thought about Lily shaking in my hallway, terrified of her own father. I thought about my mother valuing her wealthy Buckhead society reputation over my actual freedom. I thought about my father telling me to take the fall and go to federal prison so his golden child could maintain her lavish lifestyle. They had underestimated me for the very last time. I hit the enter key. The screen flashed a bright, undeniable red. A massive confirmation code populated across the monitor signaling that the stop payment had been successfully executed. The $3 million was officially frozen solid. Connor's offshore accounts were locked. His domestic credit lines were severed. The financial guillotine had officially fallen. Done, I said, leaning back in my heavy leather chair. The money is trapped in international purgatory. Nobody can touch it without a federal judge signing a release order. Tara let out a slow breath, a fierce smile of pure satisfaction spreading across her face. Connor is going to walk up to an ATM and find out he cannot even afford a bottle of water. He is completely stranded. Before I could reply, the absolute silence of my home office was shattered by a sharp buzzing sound. My personal cell phone was vibrating violently against the wooden desk. The screen lit up, casting a harsh glow across the darkened room. I glanced down at the caller identification. It was Chloe. She was calling me through an internet audio application. I ignored the call. It rang out and immediately started vibrating again. She called 3 consecutive times, her desperation vibrating through the digital signal. When I refused to answer, the phone chimed with a rapid succession of text messages. I picked up the device and opened the chat window. The messages were coming in so fast, they were practically overlapping each other. Maya, answer your phone right now. Something is wrong with my black card. It keeps declining. Connor's cards are declining too. The bank automated line says there is a federal lock on our accounts. Maya, what did you just do to our bank accounts? We are detained at customs in Paris. They are holding our passports. They are taking Connor into a back room. You need to call the bank and fix this right now. I read the frantic, furious words on the screen, and a profound sense of vindication settled deep in my bones. Connor had flown them to France exactly as Chloe had boasted to her friends, completely unaware that his offshore scheme was unraveling behind him. He probably planned to leave her stranded in a luxury hotel while he slipped away to his tropical tax haven. Instead, he was currently being escorted into a windowless interrogation room by French customs officials because his passport had just been flagged by an international banking security network. Tara leaned over and read the text messages illuminating my screen. She let out a sharp laugh that echoed in the quiet room. Well, that did not take long at all. The golden child is stuck in customs without a penny to her name, and her fraudster fiancé is getting interrogated by border security. What is the next move, Maya? I placed the phone face down on the desk, ignoring the continuous buzzing. The next move is we wait, I said, my voice perfectly calm and collected. The French authorities are not going to hold them forever without a formal extradition warrant. They will deport them on the next available flight back to the United States. Chloe and Connor are going to be forced onto a commercial plane, completely broke and completely humiliated. And when they land in Atlanta, they are going to run straight to my parents begging for an intervention. I stood up from my desk, the adrenaline finally leveling out into a cold, strategic focus. We need to prepare for the fallout, Tara. My parents are going to unleash hell when they realize I defied their orders and financially crippled their future son-in-law. They will try to spin this immediately. They will try to claim I stole the money to ruin the wedding and destroy my sister out of jealousy. We need to be ready to tear their false narrative to absolute shreds. Tara closed her briefcase, the snap of the brass locks echoing with absolute finality. Let them try, Maya. We have the digital receipts, the guardianship papers, and a 10-year-old witness who can testify to the abandonment. Your family has been playing checkers for 30 years. It is time we showed them exactly how to play chess. The next 48 hours turned my home into a war room. Tara practically moved into my guest room, keeping her legal binders stacked on my kitchen island while I monitored the global financial grid. Lily spent the weekend building a massive blanket fort in the living room, completely oblivious to the international manhunt her father had just triggered. We ordered pizza, we watched animated movies, and I made sure she felt a level of safety she had never experienced in Connor's house. Meanwhile, on my encrypted laptop, I watched the absolute destruction of my sister's perfect European getaway unfold in real time. When you trigger an international banking freeze, the financial quarantine is immediate, but the diplomatic fallout takes a few hours to catch up. I tracked Connor and Chloe's digital footprint as it imploded. First, their premium credit cards were declined at the Charles de Gaulle customs terminal. Then their mobile banking applications were locked out due to suspected fraud. Finally, the Interpol red flag hit the European Border Control database. My forensic software showed their passport numbers pinging the security matrix like a massive neon warning sign. They were pulled out of the elite fast-track lane and escorted directly into a windowless detention room by armed French authorities. Tara stood over my shoulder, sipping her black coffee as we watched the flight manifest update on my screen. They were not getting a luxury suite in Paris. They were not getting a romantic dinner under the Eiffel Tower. They were being held for questioning by international financial regulators who did not care about Connor's tailored suits or Chloe's designer luggage. Because the $3 million was frozen mid-transit, the French authorities could not immediately charge them with possession of stolen funds. But the massive irregularities and the cybercrime alert were more than enough to deny them entry. By Sunday morning, the deportation order was officially processed. I watched the airline registry as 2 seats were booked on a commercial flight back to Atlanta. They were not in first class. They were placed in the very back of the plane under the strict supervision of a federal air marshal. Connor's offshore accounts were locked. His domestic credit lines were severed. They landed at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport with absolutely nothing but the clothes on their backs and the cheap souvenir of their own spectacular failure. I knew exactly where they were going to run. Connor was a parasite, and a parasite always seeks out the largest host. They did not have a house to return to because Connor had surrendered the lease. They did not have a car because it was likely already being repossessed. They needed a fortress, and they needed someone with deep enough pockets to shield them from the incoming legal storm. They took a rideshare directly to my parents' sprawling estate in Buckhead. The moment they crossed the threshold of that mansion, the narrative shifted. I knew my sister was a manipulative liar, but the story she spun for our parents was a masterpiece of absolute delusion. My cell phone rang at exactly 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. The caller identification flashed with my mother's name. Valerie was not calling to check on my well-being. She was calling to execute a verbal firing squad. I pressed the speakerphone button and set the device on the kitchen island so Tara could hear every single word. "You malicious, jealous little thief!" Valerie screamed the second the line connected. Her voice was completely stripped of its usual country club refinement. It was shrill and vibrating with blind rage. "I am going to have you locked in a federal penitentiary for the rest of your miserable life." I leaned forward, resting my hands flat on the cool granite countertop. "Good afternoon, Mother," I said, keeping my vocal register perfectly even. I assume the happy couple has returned from their romantic Parisian vacation a little earlier than expected. "Do not play your sick psychological games with me, Maya," my mother shrieked. "Chloe and Connor are sitting in my living room right now, completely traumatized. Chloe is shaking so hard she can barely hold a cup of tea. You hacked into Connor's secure investment portfolios. You used your accounting software to freeze their legitimate business accounts and hijack their money." I looked at Tara, who simply raised an eyebrow and took another sip of her coffee. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. Chloe did not just play the victim, she completely reversed the roles. She turned her $3 million embezzlement into my financial cyber attack. "They abandoned a 10-year-old child in my house, Mother," I replied, projecting a cold, unyielding authority. "They stole a fortune from the Sterling Family Trust and tried to flee to a tax haven. The money is frozen because it is stolen property." "You are a liar!" Valerie spat back, her voice echoing through the speaker. "Connor told us everything. He told us how you have been obsessed with his finances since the day he proposed to your sister. He told us how you fabricated this entire kidnapping story to justify holding his daughter hostage. You stole their money and now you are using Lily to extort them." The sheer magnitude of the gaslighting hit me like a physical blow. Extortion. They were accusing me of kidnapping a child for ransom. Connor knew he was trapped, so he manufactured a narrative that played perfectly into my parents' pre-existing bias. My parents had spent my entire life viewing me as a bitter, envious shadow to my beautiful younger sister. Connor fed them a story where the ugly, jealous sister finally snapped, hacked the family finances, and stole a child out of pure spite. And my parents swallowed it whole without a single second of hesitation. "You are harboring fugitives," I warned her, refusing to engage with her manufactured hysteria. "Connor is completely bankrupt. He does not have a legitimate investment portfolio. He lost his job over a year ago. If you shelter them in your home when the federal agents come knocking, you will be charged as accessories to wire fraud. The only person getting arrested is you," Valerie commanded, projecting the absolute authority of a woman who believed her wealth made her untouchable. "Your father is on the phone with the police commissioner right now. We are going to tell them you had a complete mental breakdown. We are going to show them how you hijacked Connor's accounts out of pure jealousy. You are going to transfer every single cent back into Connor's control right now, and you are going to bring that little girl to our house immediately. If you want the police commissioner involved, by all means, put him on the line." I challenged, my voice hardening into a weapon. "Let him look at the flight manifest that shows Connor booking a one-way ticket to the Caymans without his daughter. Let him look at the shredded lease termination papers." "You forged all of that!" Valerie yelled, her denial absolute and unshakable. "Chloe warned us you would forge documents to make her look bad. She told us you threatened to destroy her wedding. You are sick, Maya. You need psychiatric help. If you do not unlock those accounts and return that child within the next 24 hours, I will personally come to your office and drag you out by your hair. I will destroy your firm. I will ruin your life. The line went dead. She hung up, leaving the heavy silence of the threat hanging in my kitchen. I looked at the darkened screen of my phone. My own mother was fully prepared to send the police to my door based on a fantastical lie, just to protect a man she barely knew, simply because he provided the right aesthetic for her society photos. She was willing to destroy my career, my freedom, and my sanity to keep Chloe's fake billionaire lifestyle intact. Tara set her coffee mug down, the ceramic clinking sharply against the granite. They are doubling down, Maya. They think they can bully you into releasing the funds before the Sterling family realizes the money is gone. They are about to escalate, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. Valerie does not make empty threats when her social standing is on the line. She is going to come for my business. She thinks I will fold if she threatens my livelihood in public. Let her come, Tara said, a fierce predatory glint in her eyes. She will not come alone, I replied, my mind already mapping out the tactical defense. She is going to try to publicly humiliate me into submission. But she does not realize that every move she makes right now is just tightening the noose around Connor's neck. Let them spin their lies. We just need to keep Lily safe and prepare the ultimate reception for when they finally show up at my door. The real collision is just hours away. I arrived at my firm early on Monday morning. The sleek glass walls and polished marble floors of my office usually offered me a sense of absolute control. I had built this sanctuary with my own two hands. My staff was operating with their usual quiet efficiency, and the morning appointments were already underway. I was standing near the reception desk, handing a file to my lead associate, when the heavy glass entrance doors were violently shoved open. The sharp, aggressive click of designer heels echoed across the marble lobby like gunfire. It was my mother. Valerie stormed into my professional sanctuary, wearing a pristine Chanel suit and an expression of unhinged fury. She did not bother stopping at the reception desk. She marched directly past my shocked assistant, completely ignoring the three high-net-worth clients sitting in the waiting area. Her eyes locked onto me with a level of pure venom I had never seen directed at anyone outside the walls of our family home. "You are going to fix this right now," Maya Valerie commanded, her voice loud enough to rattle the glass partitions. I handed the file to my associate and signaled for him to step away. I kept my posture perfectly straight, projecting the absolute authority of a chief executive officer in her own domain. "Keep your voice down, Mother," I said, my tone dropping to a cold professional register. "This is a place of business. If you cannot conduct yourself with basic dignity, you will be escorted out by building security." "Do not you dare speak to me about dignity," Valerie shrieked, taking another step forward into my personal space. Her carefully maintained society facade was completely crumbling. "You malicious, vindictive girl, you have absolutely destroyed your sister. Chloe is at my house right now, sobbing uncontrollably because her fiancé is being treated like a common criminal. You humiliated them in front of the entire French customs department. You hijacked their financial accounts and you kidnapped his daughter." I looked at the woman who gave birth to me and felt the last remaining thread of familial loyalty snap completely in half. She was standing in the middle of my firm, actively accusing me of a felony in front of my staff and clients, all to protect a man who had literally just attempted to frame me for grand larceny. "Connor is a common criminal, Mother," I stated, my voice carrying clearly across the silent lobby. "He is an unemployed fraud drowning in massive debt. He abandoned his 10-year-old daughter in my living room with a garbage bag full of shredded documents so he could flee to a tax haven with $3 million of stolen money. The accounts are frozen because those funds belong to the Sterling family trust. If you took 30 seconds to look past his fake Rolex and his leased sports car, you would see that he is using Chloe as a human shield." Valerie let out a harsh, mocking laugh that made my stomach turn. "You are so desperate to ruin Chloe's happiness that you are literally inventing financial crimes. Connor is a visionary investor. If he needed to access his own daughter's trust fund to secure a high-yield offshore opportunity to provide for his new family, that is his right as a father. You have absolutely no right to interfere with his business strategies. You are just a glorified bookkeeper. You hacked into his private accounts out of pure spite because you cannot stand the fact that your younger sister secured a wealthy white husband while you sit here completely alone. The sheer depravity of her rationalization hit me with suffocating force. I stared at her, realizing the horrific truth. My mother did not care if the money was stolen. She did not care if Connor was breaking federal banking laws. She did not care that a 10-year-old child had been discarded like useless baggage. In Valerie's mind, Connor was a wealthy white man, elevating the family's social status in the elite Buckhead circles. If he needed to embezzle millions from his own child to fund Chloe's lavish lifestyle, my mother fully supported it. Lily was just acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of maintaining their flawless high society image. You are openly justifying the theft of a child's inheritance, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. You are actively defending a man who tried to weaponize the foster care system to silence his own daughter. Do you even hear yourself? I hear a bitter, jealous spinster trying to tear down her own blood, Valerie sneered, jabbing a perfectly manicured finger at my chest. Let me tell you exactly what is going to happen, Maya. You are going to walk back into that office right now, and you are going to unfreeze every single one of those accounts. You are going to transfer that money back into Connor's control. And then you are going to bring that little girl to my house and personally apologize to Connor for this psychotic stunt. And if I refuse, I challenged, holding her furious gaze without blinking, then I will erase you. Valerie threatened, her voice dropping to a vicious promise. I will officially disown you. Your father and I will hire the most vicious litigators in Atlanta to sue this pathetic firm into the ground for defamation and cyber theft. We will call the police commissioner and have you dragged out of this building in handcuffs for kidnapping. We will tell every single contact we have at the country club that you suffered a complete psychotic break. By the time we are finished with you, Maya, you will not be able to get a job managing a fast food register. I will not let you ruin the wedding of the season just because you are a miserable failure. I stood perfectly still, letting her toxic threats hang in the air. I looked at the security cameras mounted in the corners of my lobby. I looked at my assistant, who was standing near the doorway with his phone recording the entire exchange. Valerie was so blinded by her obsession with Chloe's wedding that she was handing me all the evidence I needed to destroy her on a silver platter. Arguing with her was entirely pointless. She was not a mother looking out for her family. She was a co-conspirator demanding access to stolen funds. I realized that if I pushed back right now, she would leave and start laying the groundwork for her smear campaign. I needed her to believe she had won. I needed Chloe and Connor to feel comfortable enough to step out into the open. I needed all of them gathered in one place where they could not escape the absolute financial slaughter I was about to unleash. I let out a slow, measured breath, deliberately relaxing my posture to simulate defeat. I looked down at the marble floor and then back up at her furious face. You win, Mother, I said, keeping my tone appropriately subdued. I cannot fight you and Dad and an entire team of corporate lawyers. If I lose this firm, I have absolutely nothing left. Valerie straightened her jacket, a smug, victorious smile, instantly replacing her unhinged fury. I knew you would finally see reason once you realized the consequences. It is a shame we had to have this little public display, but you always were a stubborn child. What do you want me to do? I asked, playing the role of the broken scapegoat to absolute perfection. Your father and I are hosting an emergency welcome home dinner party at the estate tonight. Valerie instructed, her aristocratic arrogance fully restored. We have invited a select group of our closest friends to officially welcome Connor and Chloe back from their abbreviated trip. It is vital that we project absolute family unity to stop any rumors from spreading. You will arrive at exactly 7 o'clock. You will bring the banking security tokens to authorize the release of the funds, and you will bring the child so Connor can re-establish custody. Do not be late, and do not make a scene. I will be there, I said, my voice dangerously smooth. And I will bring exactly what Chloe deserves. Valerie gave me one final dismissive glare before turning on her heel and marching out of my firm, the heavy glass doors swinging shut behind her. I watched her climb into the back of her luxury sedan, completely unaware that she had just handed me the keys to her own destruction. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed the private number for the Sterling family attorneys. It was time to invite the real apex predators to dinner. The heavy glass doors of my firm had barely settled back into place before my fingers were flying across the screen of my phone. I bypassed my standard contact list and opened the secure encrypted directory I reserved for high-level corporate audits. I found the direct private line for Harrison Caldwell, the ruthless managing partner who acted as the primary legal bulldog for the Sterling Family Trust. The line rang exactly twice before a sharp professional voice answered. I did not bother with pleasantries or formal introductions. I needed to deploy a financial nuclear weapon, and I needed to do it immediately. Harrison, I said, pacing back toward my private office, where Tara was already pulling up federal statute codes on her laptop. This is Maya. We have a massive situation regarding the Sterling Generational Trust. Connor just attempted to liquidate the entire $3 million principal and route it to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. The absolute silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Harrison finally spoke, his voice dropped 10 degrees into a terrifying register of old money fury. "Excuse me," he demanded, the polished Southern gentleman facade instantly vanishing. "Connor does not have the authorization to move a single dime of that money without a countersignature from a licensed fiduciary. He stole my certified credentials and forged my digital signature to bypass the security protocols," I explained, keeping my delivery rapid and clinical. But that is not even the worst part, Harrison. He abandoned Lily in my living room with a garbage bag full of shredded documents and tried to frame me for the wire fraud. He and my sister bought one-way tickets out of the country. I manually triggered a Tier 1 cybercrime freeze on the transaction while it was bouncing through a Panamanian relay server. The money is locked down, but Connor and Chloe were just deported back to Atlanta. I heard the sound of a heavy chair scraping violently against a hardwood floor on the other end of the call. "Where is Lily right now?" Harrison asked, his tone shifting from corporate rage to fierce protective instinct. "She is entirely safe," I promised him. "She is locked down in my townhouse, and Tara is running point on her legal guardianship." Chloe was arrogant enough to sign a temporary medical and legal proxy before she fled. But Connor is currently sitting in my parents' mansion in Buckhead, trying to spin a narrative that I hijacked his legitimate business accounts and kidnapped his daughter. My mother just stormed into my office, threatening to destroy my entire firm if I do not bring the banking security tokens and hand Lily back to him tonight. Harrison let out a dark, terrifying chuckle that made the hair on my arms stand up. The Sterling family has been waiting for 5 years for that parasite to make a fatal mistake, so we could permanently strip him of his custodial rights. William Sterling is going to personally burn that man to the ground. When and where is this little gathering happening, Maya? My mother is hosting an emergency welcome home dinner party at their estate tonight at 7 o'clock, I told him. She wants to project high society unity to all her country club friends, to cover up the fact that her future son-in-law was just detained by international customs. She expects me to walk in there, hand over the keys to the vault, and take the fall for everything. "Do not bring the banking tokens," Harrison instructed, his voice razor-sharp. "Bring the printed audit logs, the flight manifests, and the forged signature files. I am calling William Sterling right now, and then I am calling the regional director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Cybercrimes Division. The Sterlings play golf with half the federal judges in this district." Connor thought he was outsmarting a local accountant, but he just walked directly into a federal trap. "We will meet you at the estate at exactly 7:15. I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the desk. Tara looked up from her computer, a predatory smile playing on her lips. She had heard enough of the conversation to know exactly what was about to happen. "The cavalry is coming," Tara noted, closing her laptop with a satisfying snap. "Your mother wanted to host a high society dinner party to save her golden child. She is about to host a federal raid instead. We need to prepare the execution documents," I said, walking around my desk and logging back into the encrypted server. We spent the next 4 hours printing and compiling every single piece of damning evidence we had gathered. We printed the shredded lease termination agreement that Lily had so bravely taped back together. We printed the one-way private charter flight manifests. We printed Connor's catastrophic credit reports, showing his massive mountain of debt and his numerous defaulted loans. And finally, we printed the heavily redacted routing ledger that proved he used my stolen identity to drain his own daughter's inheritance. We bound the documents in thick black leather portfolios. I was not just going to accuse Connor and Chloe of their crimes. I was going to present the undeniable mathematical proof to every single elite guest sitting in my parents' dining room. I was going to dismantle their entire fraudulent existence page by page. By late afternoon, Tara and I headed back to my townhouse to check on Lily. We found her sitting at the kitchen island, working on a coloring book. She looked up when we walked in, her blue eyes wide and questioning. "Are the state people coming back?" Lily asked, her voice trembling slightly as she gripped her crayon. I walked over and sat on the stool right next to her, putting my arm around her small shoulders. "Nobody is ever going to take you away from here, Lily," I promised her with absolute certainty. "Tara and I are going to a dinner party tonight to see your dad and my sister. We are going to make sure they can never hurt you or scare you again. Your grandfather William is going to be there too. He has been looking for a way to protect you for a very long time, and tonight we are finally going to let him do it." Lily leaned into my side, letting out a long, shaky breath. She trusted me, and I was absolutely not going to let her down. Tara arranged for a private security contractor from her law firm to sit in my living room while we were gone, ensuring the townhouse was completely impenetrable. I walked into my bedroom to get dressed for the evening. My mother had sent me 3 different text messages over the past hour, dictating exactly how I should present myself. She ordered me to wear something modest and understated. She commanded me to enter through the side door so I would not draw attention away from Chloe. She reminded me that I was there to perform a service for the family and that I needed to remain completely invisible while Connor reclaimed his stolen dignity. I read her arrogant demands and tossed my phone onto the bed. I was not going to be invisible. I was going out to war. I bypassed the modest dresses and pulled out a sharp, fiercely tailored charcoal gray suit. I paired it with a crisp white silk blouse and my highest black stilettos. I applied my makeup with meticulous precision, creating an armor of flawless professional authority. When I looked in the full-length mirror, I did not see the bitter, jealous scapegoat my mother constantly accused me of being. I saw a highly successful financial executive who held the power to destroy an empire of lies. Tara met me by the front door, wearing her own signature courtroom attire. She carried the heavy black leather portfolios containing our financial evidence while I held the keys to my car. "Let us go ruin a dinner party," Tara said, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. The drive to the affluent neighborhood of Buckhead took exactly 30 minutes. The streets grew wider, and the properties grew increasingly extravagant as we approached my parents' gated community. We pulled up to the sprawling estate just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long, dramatic shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. The scene outside the mansion was exactly what I expected. The driveway was packed with luxury vehicles. A professional valet service was rushing back and forth, collecting keys from wealthy guests dressed in designer evening wear. My parents had pulled out all the stops to project an illusion of spectacular wealth and unbothered success. They were actively celebrating a man who had tried to discard his own child just hours prior. I handed my keys to the valet, stepping out into the cool evening air. The massive mahogany front doors of the estate stood wide open, welcoming the elite society of Atlanta into the opulent foyer. Soft classical music floated out onto the driveway, mixing with the sound of clinking champagne glasses and practiced upper-class laughter. Tara stepped up beside me, holding the black portfolios tightly against her side. "Right on time," she whispered, checking her watch. 7 o'clock on the dot. I smoothed the lapels of my charcoal suit and lifted my chin. My mother wanted me to bring the banking tokens to save her golden child. Instead, I had orchestrated a catastrophic collision of federal law enforcement and old money vengeance. The guests inside were sipping vintage wine, completely oblivious to the fact that they were about to witness the most brutal financial execution in Buckhead history. I walked up the wide stone steps, my stilettos clicking rhythmically against the pavement. I did not go to the side door as my mother commanded. I walked straight through the grand main entrance, stepping directly into the lion's den. It was time to spring the trap. I stepped over the threshold of my parents' mansion, and the overwhelming scent of expensive catered food and desperation hit me instantly. The grand foyer was packed with the most influential figures in Atlanta society. Judges, politicians, real estate developers, and country club board members stood around sipping champagne from crystal flutes. My mother had spared no expense to construct a flawless illusion of upper-class solidarity. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the formal living room, providing an elegant soundtrack to a gathering built entirely on fraud. Valerie spotted me first. She was standing near the sweeping marble staircase wearing a sapphire evening gown, her face a mask of aristocratic grace. But her eyes burned with toxic relief when she saw the thick leather portfolios in my hands. She assumed I had completely surrendered. She assumed I was carrying the digital banking tokens needed to unlock Connor offshore accounts and save her golden child from ruin. Chloe was playing her part beautifully. She sat on a velvet settee in the center of the parlor, dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. She was acting like a fragile victim who had just survived a horrific, traumatic ordeal. Several wealthy wives were hovering around her, offering empty sympathies and fresh glasses of wine. Then Connor saw me. He broke away from a tense conversation with a local city councilman and marched directly across the room toward the entryway. He did not look like a polished financial executive anymore. He looked like a cornered animal wearing a bespoke suit. His jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin, and a light sheen of nervous sweat coated his forehead. He stepped directly into my personal space, trying to use his physical height and his privileged authority to box me in against the heavy wooden doors. He leaned his head down, his voice dropping into a menacing whisper, meant only for my ears. You are going to sign the authorization release right now, Maya. You are going to log into your portal, hand over the security tokens, and tell everyone in this room that your little accounting system had a technical glitch. If you do not fix the mess you made, I will personally make sure you spend the next 10 years in a federal prison for corporate espionage. I did not flinch. I did not take a single step back. I looked at his hands, which were shaking with barely contained panic. I could smell the cheap whiskey on his breath, completely betraying his confident facade. You are projecting, Connor, I said, keeping my vocal register dead calm and terrifyingly even. The only person going to federal prison tonight is the unemployed fraud currently standing in my parents' hallway, demanding access to money he stole from his own daughter. Connor reached out and tried to grab my arm to physically force me out of the foyer. Tara stepped forward immediately, her presence acting as a solid brick wall between us. She informed him with icy legal precision that if his hand made contact with my clothing, she would ensure he was arrested for felony assault before the appetizers were served. Connor recoiled, his hands dropping to his sides as he glared at my defense attorney. I walked past him, heading straight for the massive mahogany dining table situated in the center of the great room. The ambient chatter of the high society guests began to die down as people noticed my deliberate, unyielding march. My mother hurried over, her designer heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She ordered me through gritted teeth to stop making a scene and to hand the tokens to Connor immediately so they could put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind them. I ignored her completely. I dropped the heavy black leather portfolio onto the center of the polished mahogany table. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent room like a judge gavel striking solid wood. The string quartet stopped playing. Every single eye in the mansion turned toward me. I opened the thick leather cover, exposing the mountain of evidence inside. I am not here to give you the money, Connor. I announced, my voice carrying clearly and effortlessly across the grand room, reaching every single influential guest my parents had invited. I am here to introduce you to the people who are taking it back. Connor let out a harsh, mocking laugh, trying desperately to save face in front of the elite crowd. He loudly told the guests that I was having a severe mental breakdown and that my professional jealousy had finally caused me to snap. I did not argue with his pathetic performance. I simply pulled out the first stack of heavily redacted bank statements and laid them flat on the dining table. I started reading his actual financial reality out loud to the entire room. I exposed his termination from his prestigious investment firm 14 months ago. I read the outstanding balances on his 4 completely maxed out platinum credit cards. I detailed the 90-day past due notices on his luxury car lease and the secondary mortgage he had defaulted on. The wealthy guests began to whisper, pulling away from him, as if his sudden poverty was a contagious disease. Chloe jumped up from the velvet settee, screaming that I was forging documents out of pure jealousy because no wealthy man would ever look twice at a bitter workaholic like me. I did not blink. I pulled out the taped-together private charter manifest and the lease termination documents. I explained exactly how 10-year-old Lily had found the shredded papers in the trash in the dead of night. I detailed the one-way flight to the Cayman Islands and the empty rental house they had abandoned her in. I looked my sister dead in the eye and told the entire room how she had deliberately stolen my certified public accountant credentials to bypass the international banking protocols. I explained how they framed me for a $3 million federal wire fraud while they tried to escape to a tropical tax haven. The illusion of their perfect affluent life was completely shattered. The silence in the room was suffocating. My father, DeAndre, pushed his way through the crowd of horrified guests. He was absolutely furious, his face flushed with the ultimate humiliation of having his fake empire exposed to his peers. He slammed his hand on the mahogany table, ordering me to shut my mouth immediately. He screamed about family loyalty and the sacred duty to protect our reputation. He openly threatened to bankrupt my financial firm and destroy my name in Atlanta if I said one more word against his future son-in-law. He loudly claimed that the Sterling family would never find out about the temporary liquidity transfer if I just did my duty and absorbed the impact like a good daughter. The very moment those damning words left my father's mouth, the heavy brass handles of the front doors turned. The doors swung wide open, letting the cool night air sweep into the stifling mansion. Harrison Caldwell, the ruthless managing partner for the Sterling Trust, walked in looking perfectly tailored and absolutely lethal. Right behind him was William Sterling, a man whose old money influence and deep political connections dictated half the commerce in the state. Flanking the two men were two federal agents wearing tactical jackets, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation insignia stamped across their chests. The entire room froze in absolute terror. Connor stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the dining table, his face turning the color of wet ash. DeAndre tried to desperately recover his posture, rushing forward to greet William Sterling with fake diplomatic warmth and a trembling, outstretched hand. William ignored him completely, stepping past my father, as if he were nothing more than a piece of unwanted furniture. DeAndre spun around, demanding to know why I had brought federal agents into his home and destroyed his precious family legacy. I turned to my father, my forensic mind delivering the final devastating execution with surgical precision. "You do not have a legacy, Dad," I told him, watching the confusion wash over his face. "You do not even have a home anymore." Connor and Chloe needed immediate liquid cash to pay the non-refundable fees for their private offshore charter and to secure their Cayman banking setup before the stolen trust funds cleared international customs. Since Connor is completely bankrupt, Chloe had to provide the upfront capital. I pulled the final document from my portfolio. It was a freshly stamped property lien. I slid it across the table toward my parents. "When you gave Chloe full power of attorney to manage the extravagant venue contracts for her high society wedding, you handed her the literal keys to your financial kingdom." I explained, my voice devoid of any pity. 2 days ago, Chloe secretly took out a fraudulent second mortgage on this exact estate using your authorized signatures. She drained every single cent of your remaining equity and wired it directly to the private charter company to fund their escape. The federal government is seizing Connor offshore accounts tonight, but the bank holding your new mortgage is going to foreclose on this mansion by the end of the month. You were completely willing to sacrifice my freedom to federal prison just to protect your golden child, and she rewarded your blind loyalty by leaving you practically homeless. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal hung in the air for a fraction of a second before the entire room exploded into absolute chaos. Valerie let out a sound that I could only describe as a dying animal. She staggered backward, clutching her sapphire evening gown, and collapsed directly onto the polished hardwood floor. She was not crying because her daughter was in trouble. She was hyperventilating because the elite society of Atlanta had just watched her fake empire burn to the ground. DeAndre stood paralyzed, staring at the property lien on the mahogany table. The man who had spent his entire life demanding ruthless perfection from me had just been financially eviscerated by his own golden child. Connor reacted exactly the way a cornered coward always does. He completely abandoned the confident corporate facade and immediately turned on my sister. He pointed a trembling finger at Chloe and began shouting frantically to the federal agents. "She did it!" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "She is the one who stole the accounting credentials. She forged the signatures on the mortgage documents. I had absolutely nothing to do with stealing that money. She told me the funds were a gift from her parents for the wedding. She manipulated the entire transfer." Chloe spun around, her face contorted with absolute shock and pure venom. "You lying, pathetic piece of garbage," she shrieked, lunging at him with her manicured nails. "You told me you were a multimillionaire. You told me we were moving to the Caribbean to start a hedge fund. You made me take out that mortgage because you said your assets were temporarily tied up in a corporate merger. You ruined my life." The two federal agents did not waste a single second listening to their mutual destruction. They moved with swift, terrifying precision. One agent grabbed Connor by the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him face first against the dining room wall. The heavy thud of his tailored suit hitting the custom wallpaper echoed over the gasps of the wealthy guests. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard in my entire life. The second agent approached my sister. Chloe tried to back away, her eyes wide with terror, as the reality of federal prison finally sank in. She looked desperately toward our parents. "Mom, please," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face and ruining her expensive makeup. "Dad, you have to do something. Call your lawyers. Tell them I made a mistake. Tell them you authorized the mortgage. You cannot let them take me." DeAndre did not even look at her. He was gripping the edge of the dining table, staring blankly at the floor, as his country club friends began rushing toward the front doors, desperate to distance themselves from the catastrophic scandal. Valerie was still on the floor, weeping hysterically about losing her mansion and her social standing. Neither of them lifted a single finger to defend the daughter they had spent 30 years protecting. Their conditional love had an expiration date, and Chloe had just bankrupted their accounts. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, identity theft, and child abandonment," the agent stated in a loud, clear voice, reciting the Miranda rights, as he pulled Chloe's hands behind her back. She screamed and thrashed against his grip, her silk dress tearing at the seam, but the agent effortlessly secured the steel cuffs around her wrists. William Sterling stood near the entryway, watching the entire scene unfold with cold, calculating satisfaction. He looked at Connor being dragged out the front doors by the collar of his shirt, and then he turned his attention to me. He gave me a slow, respectful nod, acknowledging the absolute precision of the trap I had built. I had delivered his former son-in-law on a silver platter, and I had done it without compromising a single cent of Lily Trust Fund. Tara stepped up beside me, her arms crossed over her crimson suit, a triumphant smile lighting up her face. "You really do not play checkers, Maya," she whispered, watching Chloe getting escorted out into the flashing red and blue lights of the federal vehicles waiting in the driveway. I looked at the absolute wreckage of my parents' living room. The catered food was growing cold on the silver platters. The string quartet had long since fled the premises. Valerie was clutching a throw pillow, sobbing about her ruined reputation, while DeAndre sat heavily in a dining chair, completely broken by his own arrogance. I did not feel an ounce of pity for either of them. They had demanded that I take the fall and go to federal prison just to protect this exact room. Now they were going to lose the room, the house, and everything they had ever valued. I turned my back on my biological family and walked straight toward the front doors. I stepped out into the cool, crisp Atlanta night air, leaving them completely isolated in the ashes of their own spectacular greed. Tara and I drove back to my townhouse in comfortable, victorious silence. When I unlocked my front door, the private security contractor nodded and packed up his gear. I walked straight into the living room where Lily was fast asleep inside her massive blanket fort. I knelt down beside her, gently brushing the blonde hair away from her forehead. She stirred slightly, opening her blue eyes and looking up at me through the dim light of the television. "Are they gone, Aunt Maya?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "They are gone, sweetie," I promised her, holding her small hand in mine. "They are never going to hurt you or scare you again. You are entirely safe." 6 months passed since the night the federal authorities dismantled my family fake empire. The transition was not just a legal victory, it was a complete rebirth of my entire existence. The Sterling family recognized exactly what I had sacrificed to protect their granddaughter. William Sterling personally recommended my forensic accounting firm to his extensive network of old money corporate allies. My client roster tripled overnight. I had to lease a larger office space downtown and hire 4 new associate accountants just to handle the massive influx of high net worth portfolios. I was no longer just a successful business owner. I was rapidly becoming one of the most powerful financial fiduciaries in the state of Georgia. More importantly, the family court proceedings regarding Lily went smoother than I ever could have anticipated. With Connor facing a minimum of 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement, his parental rights were permanently terminated. Chloe accepted a plea deal to serve 7 years for her role in the identity theft and the fraudulent second mortgage. The Sterling family could have easily taken full custody of Lily and moved her to their estate on the coast, but Lily explicitly told the judge she wanted to stay with me. William respected his granddaughter's wishes completely. He provided his full blessing and threw the entire weight of his legal team behind my petition for permanent custody. Lily blossomed in the stable, quiet environment of my townhouse. The constant fear that had dictated her every movement completely vanished. She joined a local soccer league, she made actual friends at her new school, and she spent her weekends teaching Tara how to play complex video games in my living room. We built a genuine family founded on mutual trust and absolute safety, instead of biological obligation and toxic manipulation. My parents faced the exact reality I had warned them about. The bank foreclosed on the Buckhead mansion, forcing them to liquidate every remaining asset they owned just to avoid filing for complete bankruptcy. The elite society of Atlanta dropped them instantly, treating their names like a social contagion. Without their wealth and their prestigious country club memberships, DeAndre and Valerie had absolutely nothing left to offer each other. They moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, living in a perpetual state of bitter resentment. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was sitting at my kitchen island, reviewing a highly lucrative corporate merger contract for a new client. Lily was sitting across from me, chewing on the end of her pencil as she worked through a difficult math assignment. The aroma of roasted chicken and fresh vegetables filled the warm, brightly lit kitchen. My personal cell phone buzzed against the granite countertop. I glanced down at the glowing screen. It was an incoming call from an unknown number, but I recognized the local area code immediately. My parents had been trying to contact me from different prepaid phones for the past 3 months, desperately seeking financial assistance, now that their social circle had completely abandoned them. They expected me to rescue them from the poverty they had brought entirely upon themselves. I picked up the phone. I did not feel a single flicker of anger, sadness, or obligation. I just felt profound, liberating indifference. I tapped the block contact button, sending their desperate plea directly into the digital void. I set the phone face down on the counter, permanently closing the door on the people who had tried to destroy me. Aunt Maya, Lily called out, tapping her math worksheet. I cannot figure out how to balance this equation. The numbers are not matching up. I smiled, walking around the kitchen island to pull up a stool right next to her. Let me show you how to do it, I said, pulling a blank sheet of scratch paper toward us. I am actually an expert at making the numbers tell the truth. I sat there helping my daughter with her homework, surrounded by the absolute peace and staggering success I had built with my own 2 hands. I had survived the scapegoat protocol, and I had won the entire war. The greatest lesson we can take away from this entire ordeal is that blood does not automatically equal family. For years, I believed that if I just worked hard enough or stayed quiet enough, my parents would finally see my worth and treat me with the respect they so freely handed to my sister. But toxic people do not change just because you endure their abuse. They only change their tactics. When the ultimate test arrived, my biological parents were completely willing to sacrifice my freedom, my business, and my sanity, just to protect a fabricated image of high society perfection. They proved that conditional love is not love at all. It is just a transaction where the currency is your self-esteem. The moment I stopped trying to earn a seat at their table was the exact moment I realized I had the power to build my own. True family is found in the people who stand fiercely by your side when the absolute worst happens. It is found in a best friend who brings a legal briefcase to a gunfight. And it is found in a terrified 10-year-old girl who bravely pieces together shredded documents to protect the aunt she barely knows. My success gave me the financial leverage to fight back, but my ultimate weapon was simply recognizing my own undeniable value. You can never heal in the exact environment that broke you. Walking away from toxic relatives is not an act of betrayal, it is an act of profound self-preservation. When you finally cut the dead weight, you make room for the incredible life you actually deserve. Have you ever had to draw a hard line and walk away from toxic family members to protect your own peace? Share your survival story in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power and building the amazing life you deserve.